I have friends that I've grown up with that were raped when they were younger, and 8, 12 years old, and here they are in their 40s now, and it's still like it happened yesterday. That doesn't just go away with time.
Right.
And when we get to a place in society that we have such sick individuals amongst us, here's what I don't understand. If we look at the judicial system, the symbol for our court system is a lady that is blindfolded holding a scale. And how in the heck do we keep having this mental perversion when it comes to hurting kids, men that rape women, that seek out to hurt people, and they're constantly they're thrown back out on the street? $100 bond, $100 bond, $100 bond. That shouldn't be so. And when we talk about the destruction of what it does to somebody's lives, even the criminals know it is so detrimental to somebody that they can't even put those people in general population.
Right.
Because they won't make it out alive.
Yeah, you're disrespecting humanity at that point. And that's the one thing that the gang culture is big on is respect.
Yeah.
And it's which, I mean, we could get into I don't really want to get into prison politics or gang politics, but it's
the thought process behind every individual. Every car you see driving down the road, that person behind that wheel probably has a different thought process than you. They like different foods than you. They like different music than you. They parent different than you, different politics than you. What we have to get out of in order to get mentally healthy or to get mentally balanced is to remove self out of the mix. When you are the constant lead of every thought you have, got an argument with a girlfriend because I said, "You're a lot more self-centered than what I realized." That made them mad. "Well, you called me self-centered." I said, No. I already knew you were self-centered because we all are. You're just more than what I thought because everybody is going to be a little self-centered in some areas. Mm-hmm. You can't be completely selfless. You got to have some areas in your life that you have a foundation, a foot to stand on. But we have to realize in our thought, when we start putting all that together, if we are the starring role in every single one of our thoughts, probably going to be somebody who's very difficult to deal with. Think how many people would be alive today if they just would have kept their mouth shut and minded their own business. Quite a few.
Yeah.
Quite a few. But it's human nature that we are the starring role of every thought that we have the majority of the time. And when we don't start having others included in our plan, when we talked about having a purposeful life, hopefully you have other people part of that plan as well.
Well, I think you'll see that the more isolated an individual is, the more egocentric they are. And so when we're talking about how do men become more healthy as an aggregate, I think one of the things we should probably advocate for is finding like-minded individuals to spend a little time around. You know, I mean, we long for community. Although we are completely different individual human beings, right? We're our own entity with our own thoughts. We do want to be surrounded around people who are similar, right? No one's going to be exactly the same. And if they are, then I'd run away from whatever institution you're knocking on the door of, because you need some individuality in the world. But we also need to find ourselves a community. And hopefully that's a community that's predicated on selflessness and love and benevolence, right? You would hope. Positive virtues. And
another factor that if you're going to hang around people and be a group that you are committed to, meaning like you become part of my circle, mm-hmm. Make sure that there's somebody in there that disagrees with you. Because, man, when we're only around people that agree with us, I don't want to be – I've said this for years and years to the youth group. The whole ride or die friendship deal is stupid. Girls, and I go to girls because, I mean, just my experience, most of the bratty, stupid problems that we dealt with were with girls. And I would have the one girlfriend, her girlfriend, well, I don't care no matter what. I got her back. Well, you shouldn't. She's in the wrong. Mm-hmm. You should go, Tammy. I know I'm going to get a message. My name's Tammy. You hurt my feelings. Tammy, you're wrong. I'm still your friend. I'm still going to be here with you, but you're wrong. You should probably apologize and make it right instead of, you don't apologize. No, don't surround yourself with people like that. Because you're not going to go on to greatness. You're not going to go on to better hanging around people that will emphasize you're wrong.
No, you become an egomaniac at that point. People hate egomaniacs.
Absolutely.
Borderline psychopathy, really. I mean, if it goes on for too long.
You might as well just be a Democrat.
Egocentric psychopath. Okay.
There's a little video going around that I should have saved it, but it's Tim the Toolman Taylor. I can't even.
Tim Allen.
Yeah. Isn't that bad that I only remember him from the 90s?
It's good.
But this is a new show he's on, and he says to his son, what do we call people that are controlled by emotion and everything has to be their way and throw a fit when they don't? And he's like a little boy. He's like 5. He's like, Democrats, Dad. And
Oh, that's got to be Last Man Standing.
Okay, I think that's what it is. Yeah,
it's a good show.
I've never watched it. He's still Tim the Toolman Taylor to me.
You'd like it. It's very much like Tim the Toolman Taylor. It's like Home Improvement, but it's pretty politically charged. I mean, he's not shy about the fact he is.
Didn't he do that on purpose after they try to basically cancel him or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
How are you going to cancel a guy who's already worth $200 million? I mean, that's like the comedian, which he had people get up this past week and exit us out of his show. Gotcha. Oh my dear God, trust me, Dave Chappelle.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
He's like, cancel me, I dare you. Well, you're not going to cancel him. That guy's got more money than he's ever know what to do with. Mm-hmm. But he made a comment this weekend about what's going on with Israel and Palestine, and made some pretty politically charged comments, and people got up and walked out of his show for his stance on some of the things that he said. But once again, if you will listen to somebody speak long enough, they're going to tell you who they are. Problem is, most of the time we just don't listen because we're all so caught up with ourselves.
With the eyes, yeah.
Yeah. And that's a horrible place to be in, is when you get into true communication with somebody. True communication is a form of care. True communication is a form of healing. When you get around certain people and you're like, man, why do they keep talking about this certain thing over and over again a lot? Sometimes if you got a friend that's going through a divorce, let them tell you the same thing 15 times. That's a form of healing.
Yeah.
That's a form of them regurgitating all the junk that's been stuck inside them. Just listen to them. Mm-hmm. Have a friend, they lost a son. Very tragic, and years later they still talk about it. And somebody said, "Man, they just talk about it all the time." They're in that healing process, and there's no time stamp on true healing.
No, grief is still widely unknown. I mean, we've been able to articulate that it kind of takes this loop, right? And there are processes of grief, right? I'm angry, and now I'm in denial, and now I have acceptance, and so we've kind of figured out how it works, but it's not linear. Right. I mean, this is cyclical. You can go backwards, you can go forwards, counterclockwise. You could skip steps. I mean, and you're right. There's no time limit on grief. I was just talking to a veteran who's going through a divorce about that, and he's pretty self-reflective. He's a member of our VEL community, and he was saying, I'm a little worried about my behaviors right now. I'm starting to acting a little immature, and I had to take a step back and, tell him, brother, it's okay. You're going through all of this grief. Your entire life is changing. You're going through a divorce. You've got kids in the mix. The finances, all of it. Nobody is going to be able to dictate how you handle grief. The fact that you can sit in your grief and tell me, I don't know that I like how I'm handling this, shows immense growth as a human being.
Somebody who's being reflective.
That's it, right? You're not spiraling out of control. You're trying to stop yourself. You're checking the trajectory of where you're going and saying, maybe my decisions the last month don't align with my values. That's huge growth. That's the most anybody can do. You're not going to be able to grab grief by the horns and muscle it into submission the way a lot of the masculine archetypes kind of lead you to believe, right? We're not gods. This isn't Zeus throwing thunderbolts, and you're not all powerful, and you're not a deity. You are a human being with human emotions, and you need to take your humanity into account if you're going to facilitate true healing. And so it's, again, but having this conversation with this man was facilitating healing for him. And yes, maybe sometimes you sit down and you're like, man, last time we were drinking, you told me this story, and maybe it does get a little old, but who am I to say that that's not the story he needs to be talking about today?
Precisely.
You know, give him the opportunity to voice his concerns. It's his truth that we're worried about today, not my truth and how I'm perceiving it. Sure, anybody can sit down like a psychiatrist or a doctor and say, here's a prescription for your F-ups. Go fix it, bro. But that's not what healing's about. That's not what community is about. I'm not here to give you all the answers. I'm here to listen so that you can find your own answers, and then I'm here to hold you accountable to what you tell me your answers are.
That's good. That's good right there. That's a sign of somebody who's a real friend. But it goes past. That's somebody that understands the value of humanity right there. If this is what you're telling me, I love you. And I'm going to hold you accountable to that.
Yeah, which is hard to do. I mean, that brings on conflict.
Yeah.
But I love a little bit of conflict. I think that's where the deepest growth moments are in life. I mean, that's interpersonally or interrelationally, right? I mean, it takes a little bit of friction. I mean, and you get the cliche colloquialisms like a diamond needs pressure and heat in order to become what it is and all this stuff. But it's not wrong. And I think healthy relationships don't just hold the space, but almost create the space for moments of friction and confrontation, right?
Yeah.
Like, I need to know, if I'm going to trust my quote unquote brothers and sisters, I need to know that each one of us could smack each other in the face, and we're going to be like mission oriented after that. It's perfectly okay. And I want to be able to get to that level of trust with members of the community. And I think you'll find a lot of veterans, this is the camaraderie piece that they're missing, that they know they could go to their brother, they could punch him in the mouth over a dispute, and tomorrow we all form up in ranks and we're back on the mission. You don't find that in civility. And I've really been questioning, especially the last couple of years, how do I create a community where that is prevalent, where we can get to that level of depth, that level of emotional intelligence? I'd like to think that we could do it through something very similar to the religious structures that we call the church, but unfortunately we shy away from confrontation in the Christian faith at least far too often, right? We don't want to bring up my grief. I don't want to bring up my shadow self. I don't want to talk about my sins. I don't want to talk about my pitfalls. I want to shine the light on my shiny self, and that's it. Yeah. Well, that's superficial.
It's very superficial.
There's no depth in that. There's no growth in that. There's no
longevity of any healing coming out of that.
It's like having a business that, sure, it's profitable, but if it has a toxic culture, is it going to be one of these companies that's too big to fail eventually? Is it going to last even the 2 years that most companies fail, right? Probably not, because you need positive communication, healthy communication, not positive, right? Because a lot of this has to do with negative aspects of just being a human being. But you need healthy communication. So create space for confrontation. Again, if we're talking about how we can be healthy, maybe we can take a healthier approach to confrontation. It doesn't have to be rageful. It doesn't have to be anger-filled. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be obtrusive or rude. You can be calm and in fact, I think some of the most masculine men in the world are very calm, almost to the point where it's a little spooky. Like, well, is he not experiencing any emotions? This should be pretty emotional right now. But when you've got that level of self-understanding, you don't have to present yourself in a frenzied way. So you create, and you're going to find people coming to you for more answers if you can sit calmly, listen with intention, and hold space for some uncomfortable conversations.
And one thing that I love what you said, make that space, but if you find yourself getting rageful when somebody, I'm not going to use the term kind of steps on your toes, but maybe identifies something in you that you don't see about yourself, and your first response is to get rageful and to get defensive, just know that that person's 100% correct what they're talking to you about.
Right. And you know it.
And you know it
deep down.
You know it.
Your subconscious knows it.
Yes.
And that's that shadow self that Carl Jung talks about. You have to be able to, and I love Jungian theory because it's not necessarily that I need to abolish my shadow self, but I need to cover my shadow self with love and understanding first and foremost, or else it's going to present in more behavioral issues, right?
What is it? The Proverbs 7 or something, 7 or 8. I can't. It's in Proverbs. Rebuke a fool, and they'll hate you even more. When I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I could not take correction at all. I would always have a rebuttal. I was never truly listening. I was just waiting to talk. Fast forward 20 years later, and I realize, in the words of Danny Carpenter, when I look back at that 22-year-old kid, I don't like him. I was prideful. I had all the answers. I knew everything. And I knew everything that everybody should be doing. That last one's the kicker. I knew what everybody else was supposed to be doing. That's not my calling. That's nobody's calling. The only time that's your calling is when you're a boss, but guess what? You hang that hat up when you clock out.
Yeah, but even then, that's not even really the job of the boss.
No.
It's to pull out what's best inside of you.
It's to elevate and bring out part of your team and elevate them.
Yeah, leading. Not managing people.
Well, that's a big one right there. And your leaders, who is leading you? Be careful who you tie yourself to.
Well, lead yourself first.
There you go.
Before you look for everybody else to be your source of motivation, turn inward. You know, and it's as simple as just like getting up and going for a walk every day, getting up and making your bed, getting up and doing your dishes, right? And do the little things. Lead yourself first, and you'll find that you're not being attached to maybe celebrities or professional athletes in these heroic capacities. They're not deities either.
No.
You need to be able to lead yourself before you're going to be able to lead anybody else.
And, you know, I do understand that LeBron James can bounce a basketball and shoot it very well.
Very well.
But I'm not going to take any other advice from him. If I need to know how to play basketball, I'll ask him how to play basketball. Let's take it to the mindset of this. I can only speak from what I've experienced. James, I have seen this happen hundreds, if not thousands of times over the years growing up. You grew up in a pastor's home, and I'm going to tell you, my parents are rock stars on dealing with people. I never got to see, I would see it, but my father and my mother dealt with negativity in such a way that it never carried out into our home. But I have seen so many, and it's predominantly in men. If I need to know how to play basketball, well, I wouldn't go to LeBron. I'd get a hold of Michael Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
But that's another podcast. Yes, the greatest. Thank you. So LeBron who? But you go to the right places and the right channels for where you need help. But what would be so amazing to me, and it's still to this day so prevalent to me, I watch men come in church and they get in and they have all the answers and they know everything, and the guy who's been doing this for 40 years has traveled the world, written books, studied, can just lay everything out. They know more than the person that's done that for 40 years, and they can't even begin to tell you where Exodus is at, but they have all the answers. That's a sign of an immature brain. Mm-hmm. That's a sign of somebody who doesn't really want growth. Until you can admit, I don't know, and I need to get around people who do know. But it's not the fact about knowing. I'm going to kind of crawfish on that. It's not about knowing. It's about grasping. You can know how something works, but you may not grasp the reality of what's going on there. It's just like your watch. I have friends. I got a buddy of mine, Jared. He's got like a $20,000 watch. I'm like, $20,000 watch, man, that's insane. But he loves watches. From a kid, he's loved them because he was so fascinated with the what is the constant movement, or what's it called? Like when you move it constantly charges the watch, and you got to get a box to make your watch move when you don't have it on. But that was his fascination. He wanted, most people just get a watch and it tells me time. He's like, do you know how that works? Do you know the dials in there? Like, he's so fascinated. So yeah, for him, $20,000 watch, because he grasped everything about that watch. I worked at the Men's Warehouse. We had one of our top salesmen. He would tell me, when people come in, there's going to be 3 types of people in life that are informational, meaning there's some people who are going to be like, I need a suit, and that's all you're going to get. Then you're going to have somebody who's like, I need a suit, but I want a good one, and I want to know why it's good. And then you have the other people that are just aesthetic. I just want what looks good. Mm-hmm. But the people that are informational on the way of, well, I like this suit, and it's a gabardine. It's sewn at a 45-degree angle. It'll wear better, and there's somebody that'll buy on that precipice right there because they want to understand. When you get purposeful, don't just, well, I know 2 + 2 is 4. Grasp what's going on around you. Understand how things actually work. Be intentional. But we don't take the time to do that anymore. We hop on Google and we get the answer and we think we know something, and we don't really know.
You're talking the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? Wisdom comes from experience. You got to get out there. It's the man in the arena that matters.
Yeah.
Right. And knowledge is just the ability to regurgitate something somebody else told you.
Absolutely.
And I have used that as a red flag indicator in my life, or at least in my business dealings. If I'm talking to an individual and they present themselves, or they admit that they are one of the types that just regurgitates information really well, I will run the other way.
Yeah.
To me, that's like being the type of individual that will talk down on your competition when they're not around. Like, that's a character flaw to me. You know, it's like, it's something to be fearful of, because I think for me, it shows insecurity. It's like, you've got to be willing to go out there and do wrong, be wrong, fail a few times before you can really have the wisdom to be able to teach kind of the next generation. Right. And I don't want somebody who's just going to regurgitate what some professor said in some theory class. I want to talk to somebody who's been in the knife fight. I want somebody a little bloody.
Absolutely. And that's, I think when we get into the, cause it's going to come to every man. It'll come to women too, but I don't know. I can't speak for women, but it's going to come to every man. One day you're either going to have to, I'm not going to use that analogy. It's not a good analogy. You're either going to have to grow up and say, okay, hey, starting today, I got to be a man. I got to start facing this stuff I put on the back burner. And I'm not talking about I need to repair the mailbox and I need to paint the front door. I'm talking about maybe I need to have more of a nest egg put away, and I've been frivolously spending stupid stuff and going out and buying expensive dinners, and say, hey, I need to realize that I may have some things come my way that I need to have a rainy day fund. I need to start planning better. Mm-hmm. That's a very small thing in life. Maybe there's some people that you need to realize, I avoid people. I'm at home all the time by myself. Even if it's just going out, and I went through a really dark period in my life. And I tell you, the reason it got so dark for me, James, is when I came out of it, that was my dark period. Because I didn't like who I became. Mm. I didn't like the way I acted. It wasn't who I was. I became somebody I wasn't. And one of the things I did is I locked myself away. I was alone by myself. I would go to Ty Lee right down the road by myself all the time and eat lunch. I had to start making myself get around people. Because I could sit there and talk to you and then leave and go home and not talk to another person the rest of the week. That didn't bother me one bit. Matter of fact, I loved it. Yeah. I loved it. I think that was kind of explaining something to you a little bit ago about the relationship aspect of certain things. Like, wait a second, I don't have to talk to you all the time. This is great. Yeah. Like, sign me up. Yeah. But that's, being alone is dangerous when you become self-destructive. You do have to be alone at times to really recognize who you are. Mm-hmm. That's a hard pill to swallow. Like, if you start like really getting cognizant and studying, what type of person am I? Who am I really?
What's it like to be around me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's a question I love asking myself is what is it like? What do other people perceive
Yeah.
when I'm around? Because you'd be surprised the lies you tell yourself. You really would be. And I recently went through the Discovering Parts Within course at the Bell Institute, and it's a 12-week self-discovery class. And that question was presented. And the cohort I was in had some really brilliant engineering minds. I mean, just real A-type personalities, just very intellectual human beings. And it was funny because they had pointed out, like, James, in all your language, you continue to kind of act like you're this epic screw up. Like, and that's kind of how I perceived myself as a teenager.
We're harder on ourselves than...
For sure.
Yeah.
And I've always called myself an F up. I mean, the title of my first book was A Fuck Up Writes a Book, because that's just how I perceive. And it was supposed to be ironic. Like, if you look at my resume and my accomplishments, you wouldn't call me a fuck up. But I see myself as a fuck up, and this is why, right? But you can be your own worst enemy in that regard. And so you have to be very conscious when you're taking the time to do all this introspective work, all this self-healing, that you don't go down that self-destructive path. And you've got to be able to realize, I'm telling myself some lies. That's why I'm in this dark moment.
Yeah.
Right? Where is the light? And that's where I think reaching out to the community, and it can be as simple as going to your best friend and being like, dude, am I an asshole? Like, am I a jerk? Do I present myself as a loving, caring individual? Or because they'll give it to you straight, hopefully. If they don't, you need a different social circle. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Isolation can be very dangerous.
Very dangerous.
And you see that with a lot of veterans that come home. And I think a lot of them isolate, one, because they've lost their identity. They don't know what they don't know what it means to be their first name, if that makes sense. You know, in the military, you're called by your last name. So I was Green, GM2 Green. I didn't know who James was. And I went by Garrett as a young kid and a teenager, and he was kind of a screw up. So I knew who Garrett was, and he was a bad civilian. I didn't know who James was going to be. So I just isolated myself. I didn't know who I wanted to present myself to the world as. So a lot of veterans lose their identity. And I think on top of that, they also feel immense shame and guilt by what they've had to do, by the culture in the military, because we're not just talking about stacking bodies and killing babies overseas and all of this egregious stuff that has happened in warlike scenarios in antiquity. I'm talking about just the culture of being in the military. Maybe you cheated on your wife overseas and you're really shameful about that. Maybe you and your brothers, you went out and beat somebody up you weren't supposed to. It's like, it doesn't always have to be a combat related incident in order to have moral injury.
Yeah.
And so I think these guys, they come home, they don't know who they're supposed to be, and they're a little ashamed of who they became within the culture. So they don't know how to assimilate themselves in society. And you can't necessarily go to your civilian friends and talk about a combat-related trauma issue. They're not going to understand.
No, they can't grasp it.
Well, even if it wasn't combat-related, most of them don't understand extreme trauma. And they don't understand emotional intelligence enough to give you sound advice. And I think a lot of veterans at least have the intelligence level and the emotional intelligence, because you have to be emotionally intelligent to be a part of a good team. I mean, it's something I hear a lot. Veterans aren't emotionally intelligent, and that's dog shit. It's just a different level of emotional intelligence because I'm tapped into my brothers and sisters. I'm not egocentric in that moment, but that's neither here nor there.
You have to have extreme emotional intelligence to take order in combat and not react out of emotion, but you react out of a triggered response.
Blackout, right?
But you stay emotionally cognizant. That's extreme emotional intelligence.
But more than that, you're with a unit, and the unit, who's in the unit? Other individuals, and you have to be able to collaborate with these people. You eat, sleep, shit, fight. Train. You do everything with these other individuals. And your team is only as strong as your weakest link. So you have to be tapped into your teammates on a constant basis. That was one thing. When my second deployment, we'd sit in the armory and we'd just talk about life, man. And it was so important for my gunnery team to get on that connected level. You got to know what each one of you is fighting for. You got to know what's at stake. You got to know what motivates each other. And you don't get the leadership coaching that you would in the civilian sector, right? So it becomes inherent and innate, this desire to know the emotionality of your peers. So there is this very deep level of emotional intelligence that comes with being operational in a team. Not too dissimilar to that of athletes, professional level athletes. They're highly emotionally intelligent a lot of the time as well. They're emotionally inept when it comes to their own emotions, but they are highly conscious of other people's emotions around them. And I think that can also spin people into their own prison in a lot of ways. That's where you got to check yourself. What lies are you telling yourself? One thing my aunt tells me, she's been an executive coach for like 30 years, massive nonprofit she's worked for. She gave me a kaleidoscope for my 30th birthday. And she said one of her mantras was, what would I rather believe? So life is like a kaleidoscope. If I just were to turn it a little bit, all the shapes, all the designs, all the colors, they're different than what I thought they were beforehand. It's the same prism I'm looking at, but it's a completely different picture that I'm perceiving. And you got to be able to get to the point in your relationships where you can kind of ask that same question. What do I believe about this relationship that's could be a lie? How does that other individual perceive me? How am I sabotaging kind of the full-blown potential in all of this? And it doesn't have to be in romantic relationships either.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm doing this for individuals in the VEL community on a weekly basis, just because I'm capable of holding the space for them to ask those kind of questions. And I've lived my life in an integritous enough way that they believe my answers. Even if they don't agree with it, they know that there's some merit there because they know I care about them.
Yeah.
I used to tell my trainers all the time. I had a team of trainers for Swole Connect, and we would focus on needs-based selling.